Okay, so I'm Francis Canija, and today we're going to interview Bob Bertrand of Miami, Florida, and Les Winston, also of Miami, Florida.
Yes.
And I'm going to let them give an introduction on themselves, who they are, about 2 minutes apiece. And Bob, you can start.
Okay. My name is Bob Bertrand, and I'm a person very much interested in the legal system and the abuses of the legal system and the other damage it's doing to the country on an everyday basis. And I believe strongly that the lawyers in this country have got a stranglehold on every single citizen, the average family, the average company, one frivolous lawsuit away from bankruptcy, and the system of justice in the United States is your innocent until proven guilty. My feeling is very strong in the area that the fact that the lawyers are totally corrupt, and we're not going to change until we have a system of checks and balances. I think the system is based on the fact that we're supposed to have separation of powers, we're supposed to have checks and balances, but the fact that the lawyers in this country have got a stranglehold on every single citizen, the average family, the average company is one frivolous lawsuit away from bankruptcy. And again, we don't have separation of powers. We have a thing called same hands control, which is exactly what James Madison wanted about 250 years ago. When they wrote the federal papers, they said separate. Madison warned it very plainly. He said, if the control of all three branches of government get under the single same hands control, then we will have tyranny and corruption, and there'll be nothing in the system to correct the problem. That's what our problem is today. This is not a government of the people, this is a government of the lawyers.
Okay, and you've been at it for how many years?
I've been at it for about 30 years.
Okay, and Les?
Yes, hi.
Yes.
I'm Les Winston, and I'm a citizen of the United States of America, and I have some concerns about the way things are operating in the country from the standpoint of how it's controlled, who controls the legislature, who controls the executive branch, and how the judiciary basically has become a very powerful branch of government, more powerful than the others because of the assimilation of attorneys into the systems. I have had a radio show here in South Florida that operated for about a year on Biz on 880 AM locally, which was called This Bar, the Florida Bar, which I started that project for the purposes of allowing individuals who were victims of rogue attorneys to talk about what happened to them in their dealings with the attorneys that they were working with, and the fact that when they complained about the unfairness or the harm that was being done by the attorneys to them, which would have been outside the scope of the services that they were expecting to receive, and they went to the Florida Bar to complain about it. The Florida Bar, the entity, the Florida Bar, was not doing what they were supposed to do as a regulatory agency of the attorneys. And the program basically highlighted the fact that because attorneys regulate themselves through the Florida Bar, and I believe that the Florida Bar is actually a union in the state of Florida, that damages individuals, each individual. I don't think that attorneys actually have a stranglehold on all of us.
Not all attorneys are bad, but...
No, and I don't believe all attorneys are bad. I have a lot of friends that are attorneys, clients that are attorneys in my financial services business. And I believe that when you get into certain circumstances, there are ways for you to be abused or for attorneys to take care of, to take advantage of the situation. And I think that the judges are in that mix as well, because they're all members of the same association, of the Bar Association. And this is a problem that probably stems from the fact that lawyers are in all branches of government, and they do have a lot of power.
Okay, Let's talk a little bit about the Florida bar and probably pertaining to bars around the country. Are they a branch of the government?
No.
Or are they a private corporation? What are they?
Well, that's a difficult problem because they've created the Bar Association in Florida, which was created in 1949 by the Supreme Court through actually a vote that was held by the attorneys in 1949. A ballot was cast by the attorneys to determine whether or not the bar should be integrated, and that's not with regard to race. That's just whether or not the bar should be a requirement or a controlling element for attorneys to practice in the state of Florida. And the creation of that Bar Association has made it kind of a quasi-governmental agency, which is supposed to be under the aegis of the Supreme Court, but they also hold themselves out to be an association which is not a governmental agency, and it depends on what the circumstances are. And so because of that, they have cast themselves into a position where nobody can control them. They are an entity unto themselves. The Bar Association has become a very powerful organization. It is not subject to the ethics rules in the state of Florida. All other agencies of government, other entities that serve the public are subject to ethics, but they are not. I've checked that out, and that creates some serious problems from the standpoint of how the individuals who are running the Bar Association are governed. And we've had the same leadership in the Florida Bar Association for over 20 years, and I think that that's part of the problem with regard to maintaining the professional standards of the legal profession. All other professions in the state of Florida are controlled by the Department of Business and Professional Regulation. The only group that regulates themselves are the attorneys.
Yet they input into the lawmaking of the practice book rules for the Florida Bar. The legislature and the judiciary, various judiciary committees within the judiciary look to them to help formulate the practice book rules. So doesn't that kind of conflict with the fact that they're kind of a private entity, and yet they have so much power to influence the practice book rules?
Well, I don't think, they don't necessarily make the rules of procedure. They make the rules as to how the practice of law is supposed to be handled in the state of Florida, how lawyers are supposed to practice in the state of Florida. They've set certain controls.
But they also input into the judicial committees.
Yes,
On the practice book rules, which is a step beyond just making rules for lawyers.
Well, the judicial nominating committees, the various committees that deal with the appointment of judges, also with the regulation of the attorneys, that's the issue. I think what it is basically it's a union in a non-union state. And because it is a union, not being declared a union, they collect dues. In order to practice law in the state of Florida, you have to belong to the Florida Bar. And so from that standpoint, they can control any attorney in the state of Florida by virtue of their power to take away their license to practice. And what happens many times, people who are attorneys who can see the problem will be whistleblowers. And the whistleblowers, instead of the people that they're blowing the whistle against being affected by the Florida Bar, the whistleblowers get attacked by the Florida Bar. So what you have is you have a problem that can't get resolved because the Florida Bar doesn't act in the proper capacity to control the attorneys. And the other part of that is that judges, I mean, if you look at who are the members of the Florida Bar, all the judges, because they all were basically lawyers before they were judges, and they're all still members of the Florida Bar. The governor of the state of Florida, the past governor was a member of the Florida Bar, the Attorney General is a member of the Florida Bar. You can't separate the Florida Bar from the hierarchy of the government, and so that leads to abuses. I'm not saying that all attorneys abuse everybody, that's not true. But when it comes to certain circumstances and certain instances, generally when you're involved in bankruptcy, divorce, guardianships, probate, these are areas where attorneys can take advantage of their clients. And if they do, the clients that they're taking advantage of don't have any recourse, because when they go to the Florida Bar, there's an ineffective control.
Okay, let's talk about one of those examples, Nancy Grant.
Yes.
Okay, and she asked that, she tried to put in papers asking the Florida Bar, what exactly are they? Are they a private entity, or are they an arm of the government? So can you tell the audience what happened? But before we do, I want to stop the camera and get better sound, okay?
Sure.
Okay, you're rolling, and you can take off where you, Nancy Grant.
Yeah,
What happened to
I
her?
interviewed Nancy Grant on This Bar, the Florida Bar, on that radio show, and actually all of the interviews that I did on that radio show are archived on the website www.thisbarthefloridabar.com, and I think there's about 45 different interviews that were done, but Nancy Grant was one of those interviews. Nancy Grant got involved in the process because of her concern over whether her son was being, I believe he was in prison, and she was trying to see that he was tried, or that he was going to have a trial date. And she petitioned, I believe, a petition of habeas corpus. I don't want to get into legal issues, I'm not a lawyer. But what she found was...
Well, hold it, let's talk about that. I mean, that's pretty fundamental protections guaranteed by our Constitution, habeas corpus, and
Yes.
and the process, the legal processes were trying to deprive her son of proper habeas corpus, correct?
Well, they did. I mean, she basically was trying to find a way to solve that problem, and she created a petition for him. And when that petition became known to other inmates, they were also suffering from the same problem. There was no timely trials going on in that particular area. And she ended up being prosecuted by the Florida Bar as a result of a power surge by the people that she was going after, who weren't doing their job in the judiciary, and that included judges, lawyers, and in order for her to get past that, she was trying to go through the court system to do that, and it ended up where the Florida Bar accused her of the illegal practice of law, practicing law without a license or being a member of the Florida Bar. But that's the kind of issues that give me a lot of concern as a citizen of the country, because you expect that we don't live in a country that's dictated by people in power, and it's almost Star Chamberish, and I think that was part of what may have been the driving force behind the early leaders of our country, the early Congress, trying to enact, if not having enacted, the 13th Amendment, which of course which is a dispute, which a lot of people think is a conspiracy theorist, dream come true, because conspiracy theorists can use that as a means to try and take down lawyers and remove lawyers from all government positions. That's a drastic measure under any circumstance. I think what our problem today is that the bar associations have become very powerful, that the combination of all the bar associations, where they're integrated in some 37 states, and what that means is that in order for a lawyer to practice law, in the states that have integrated bars, the lawyers must be part or belong to those bar associations, and they become the regulatory agencies.
All right, Bob, you have some comments about the Nancy Grant case and also what Les was just saying
Yeah, well,
about how lawyers have infiltrated all three branches of government.
yeah, the Nancy Grant case is it's just such a great injustice, and that woman has suffered so much. And just by using common sense, you'd realize that this is wrong what they try to even do to her. Throw a woman in jail because she's trying to defend her son and because she's violating some different concepts they got in the legal system is like a disgrace. It's totally...
And she did it pro se, is that
Exactly. And the thing is, it goes against every grain of common sense that they get away with this sort of thing. And that's what bothers me is, there's one little book out there, it's called The Death of Common Sense in America. And I just think it's so important that people understand that people just don't believe in the system. I mean, they criticize the system, but because it needs criticizing.
Right, and lawyers really won't fight hard enough on a constitutional level.
Oh no, this is there's a wonderful lawyer, I can't believe I said that, but there's a wonderful lawyer there, his name is Philip K. Howard. He wrote a book called The Death of Common Sense in America. And this book is just full of material that shows the system doesn't work. And when you don't believe in the system, it's not going to work. It's counterproductive. And
But there's an inherent prejudice against pro ses in the state of Florida and elsewhere. Is that correct?
Yes, that's. In some states they're treated like scum. I mean, it's that bad.
Yet there's an absolute right to defend yourself pro se.
Exactly. And Philip K. Howard just had an article published in the Washington Post, and he basically stated too many laws and too many lawyers, and that's basically where the problem is. And if we don't straighten this problem out, I believe strongly that the system's going to collapse.
Okay, now Les, back to Nancy Grant. What did happen to her? She went to jail, right?
Yeah, she spent time in jail, and because she was very vocal and was able to reach out to the public for assistance, her case became more notorious than others, and so she wasn't buried in prison to be forgotten, and she was able to get out of prison after spending, I don't know, I think it was 6 months or something. It's an outrageous story from the standpoint of what rights were violated. And this goes really back to the issue of whether or not there is a ruling class in the country. And the ruling class, as has been basically said by a lot of the victims that I interviewed on my program, is the lawyers and the judges. The judges today, and I'm not saying all judges, I'm just saying that a judge can make a ruling in a case that is completely contrary to the law, contrary to precedent, and nothing can be done about it except to go to the higher level and appeal it. And they use that as a means to say, well, if you don't like what I ruled, you can go appeal it. Like that's a simple process. Like that's something you can do in 10 seconds. No, you can't do that in 10 seconds if you're not a powerful person. For example, when Rahm Emanuel wanted to run for the mayor of Chicago, and he was determined to be ineligible to run by lower courts in Illinois, he was determined to be ineligible at the lower court, then he was determined to be ineligible at the appellate court. He had to go to the Supreme Court to get a ruling in his favor. Ordinarily, that would take months or years to get to that level, if the Supreme Court would even hear it. But because it was Rahm Emanuel, and obviously a powerful person, in one day, the Supreme Court of Illinois determined that he could run for mayor. And that's nobility. That's an advantage that a class of people has over the other class of people. And I think that the protesters on Wall Street, as well as the Tea Party, I think that those protests are against the system, but most people don't really know what they're protesting against because they can't identify it. it's so amorphous that they can't put their hands on exactly what is happening to them or what is happening to the system. But I would say that that is a rebellion against the corporate United States. The fact that the United States is operating as a corporation as opposed to operating as the United States of America and a free republic. And because of the power of lawyers in positions of government that enable them to manipulate the system, we're seeing the effect on us today. When they talk about too big to fail, the corporation, the United States corporation, has become too big to fail in a sense. And of course they have the power of the printing press and the power of the tax, which gives them a tremendous advantage. And if the legal profession, and let's be candid, the President of the United States is a lawyer. He's passed he's had Obamacare passed. The way that is going to be determined now is going to rest with the judiciary. It's going to go to the Supreme Court. There's a question as to whether or not there's a conflict there in the sense that, is he a lawyer first or a president first? Is the legal profession going to protect one of their own who has wanted this Obamacare? Does Obamacare help the legal profession?
Yeah.
Most of what
But
goes on
let's
today,
be frank about that.
Yeah.
Some judges have ruled that his Obamacare,
Yes.
certain aspects, are unconstitutional.
Yes.
So we have to keep that into perspective.
Yes,
But
there is a
I want to give Bob some airtime
Sure,
too.
please.
But less. We don't want to discourage the citizens and the public from pursuing justice on their own if they so deem. And Bob, you have a victory story to tell concerning gag orders that were instituted in the state of Florida that were unconstitutional.
Basically, were.
And so, what year was that, and what was the incident, and then go into the specifics.
1980.
Uh-huh.
And what it was is that the basic thing said that if a lawyer done something wrong to you or something happened to you, you could file a complaint to the Florida bar, but you had to keep your mouth shut about it. And so you had to get a lawyer to go into to explain your case, and basically it got washed out. I mean, 98% of the complaints against lawyers in the state of Florida every year are basically thrown in the waste cans, and the whole thing is a scam to waste your time. The lawyer steals money out of trust accounts, lying, blackmail, cheating. It's just impossible to get any justice out of the system, and it's all covered up inside.
But you got justice, or at least for a while.
Yes, we did for a while. So now it's covered up another way. But basically, it said if you made a complaint against a lawyer, you filed a complaint with the Florida bar, and you had to keep your mouth shut for the rest of your life.
Right.
So that was what it comes down to.
So that's not right, and you fought it.
We fought it. Yes, we fought it.
And you and
Ron B. Bass and myself,
and who's Ron?
Ron B. Bass is the head of the National Congress for Legal Reform. He's an activist, and our website is constitutionalguardian.com. And the basic thing is first we went to the ACLU, and because they said we had to hire a lawyer, so we went to the ACLU, and they said, yes, we'll go ahead and file a case in federal court. We went before Judge Stanley Marcus. He used to be a U.S. prosecutor in Miami. And we brought the case up and showed how the abuses took place. And Judge Stanley Marcus ruled in our favor. And he said, yes, he said, I definitely, it's a total abuse, and I totally concur with you 100%. And again, the fact that he's a U.S. prosecutor, he knows how corrupt the system is. Well, believe it or not, we wrote a letter to the Florida bar, and they said they're not going to honor this ruling because they take their marching orders from the Florida Supreme Court. Well, I went ahead and got, the fact that we tried to get a lawyer, and there's a woman named Kathy Lemon Jackson. She came to us and she said, I'll take on the case, but it's going to cost you at least $100,000 because I'm going to get ostracized.
Can you just wait?
I'm going to be ostracized by the Florida bar and the Florida Supreme Court, and I'm going to lose a lot of cases, and it's not going to be worth it to me. But she said, if you give me $100,000, I'll take the chance of working my way back in the system. Well, we couldn't come up with
And
$100,000.
I seem to remember you told me the reason was because after she would take such a case, she would be blackballed.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And that's why she wanted that kind of money.
Right. So anyway, she said, but why don't you guys try to do it on your own? So we went ahead and filed papers with the Florida Supreme Court. We filed documents showing the abuse of the system. And finally, the Supreme Court recognized that they would accept it. I got a petition of several thousand names of citizens of the state of Florida saying that Ron D. Bass represents the interests of the citizens of the state of Florida. We sent that document into Tallahassee, and they said they would recognize it, and they would hear.
Well, let's hear the whole story on that. The bar and their lawyer came forth and said, "We represent the state." Can you put it?
Okay. Well, the fellow named Steve Zach was the president of the Florida Bar at the time.
Yeah.
And I chartered a bus. It cost me $800 out of my own pocket to get all these people to go to Tallahassee. I had the parents of murdered children, Victims Outreach Force, Citizen for Justice, Southern Christian Leadership Conference, the Black Muslims. We had everybody. We packed that Florida Supreme Court solid. And the president of the Florida Bar, I mean, we had so many people that they had to put loudspeakers in the front of the Supreme Court, and the people were still all standing out all over the place.
Where were the cameras?
No, the camera people, the newspaper people that keep away from us, that we were probably a bunch of communists, so that, they didn't want to get involved with us. So anyway, we packed the place, and the president of the Florida Bar stood up and he said, "My name is Steve Zach, I'm the president of the Florida Bar, and I represent the citizens of the state of Florida to make sure that these gag rules and confidentials are complete protection of our system." And so Ron D. Bass, I had a petition of thousands of names, and he held a petition up and he said, "My name is Ron D. Bass," and he said, "I represent the citizens of the state of Florida. Mr. Zach, where's your petition?" And of course, everybody just was stunned. And so the Supreme Court recognized Mr. Bass, and he explained the whole system, how corrupt it was from top to bottom. And one of the Supreme Court judges piped up. He says, "Oh, I'm going to do everything I can to protect our lawyers in the state of Florida." He said, "Our lawyers are in the front line of battle in every courthouse in this state, and they're protecting the rights of the citizens. And we're doing our best to protect those lawyers that are fighting so hard in this courthouse to make sure that they have good protection from us in the Supreme Court." Well, thank heavens for Rosemary Barquette. She was one of our Supreme Court judges. And she used to be a Catholic nun, and she had a great deal of compassion. And she said, "I have never seen the Supreme Court packed so solid. And when I look at the sign on that side of the bus over there, it says, 'Parents of murdered children.' What an awful thing to happen to a family when they have their child murdered, and there are gag rules and confidentiality that can protect people in the system, because they've got to go through some kind of a hoops to get there." And anyway, everybody, and I'm a Catholic, and I made the sign of the cross right away. I said that it takes one person to change the system, and it's going to be Rosemary Barquette, because she's going to talk about the horror stories to some of the other Supreme Court judges, and somewhere along the line, they're going to hear what's going on here.
Okay, so to make a long story short, you won.
We won, yes, and it was but it's just a very small article in the Miami Herald. It was about a month later, and there's an article in the Supreme, just a little, Florida becomes the first state in the nation that gets rid of these gag rules and confidentialities.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I couldn't
well,
believe it.
they're supposed to stand for transparency. What happened?
Well, that's why they call this. They don't call it democracy. It's a hypocrisy, because they say one thing and something else is actually happening. And that's the biggest problem you have, is the fact that there's no accountability in the system. These gag rules and confidentialities were made basically for the protection of judges and lawyers. And as far as the victims are concerned, they had no voice. And actually, what it comes down to, we have probably the same thing today, because everybody's intimidated by the system.
Okay, so we need stronger laws from legislature.
Oh, definitely. The legislature, and if you go to Tallahassee today and you talk to the legislators, the first thing, they look over the shoulder, they roll their eyes, they say, "Well, the Florida Bar is not going to go for this." In other words, you're only spinning your wheels.
Okay.
And that's what it is.
And Les, what do you have to say about that story and legislature as well?
Well, I think that the fact that lawyers regulate themselves is at the root of the problem in this state, and is also at the root of the problem in those other states where you have integrated bars, which is some 37 other states. And what that leads to is it leads to a hierarchy. It was estimated that in the state of Florida there are approximately 10,000 lawyers who are what they consider to be the inner circle of lawyers out of the 70,000 lawyers that are in the state of Florida. And those 10,000 lawyers are more privileged than the other lawyers. And then lawyers in general are more privileged than the citizens of the United States. And so what that's created is an imbalance where citizens don't have the same public and private rights.
But that's an abuse at the core of our republic.
Yes.
Because we, the people, are the sovereigns. So what happened? And how can we fix it?
Well, I think the first step to fix it is to, as I say, is to have a way to regulate the lawyers that is not resting with
Citizens
the bar
committees
association.
involved, maybe?
Well, I think they should be under the Department of Business and Professional Regulation.
Uh-huh.
I mean, there's a statement, there's a...
That's a powerful statement, actually, if
Yeah.
we were to do that.
Well, the regulation falls under the police powers of the state, but lawyers in the state of Florida don't fall under the same police powers as everybody else, as every other profession. If I, as an insurance agent, violate the rules of conduct as an insurance agent, violate the rules of my license, I am not going to be judged by somebody else who is going to have a conflict in punishing me, where a lawyer is ending up being punished by the union that he belongs to, and that's part of the problem. So if the lawyer is in favor, and he's one of the 10,000 that's in favor, the chances of him being punished are very limited. And in fact...
Well, these statistics actually prove that. I mean, the way the system works now with grievance committees.
Well, the fact of the matter is that there's probably 9,000 or 10,000 complaints lodged against attorneys, and if 100, or let's say 700 over the course of a year get reprimand or some other problem, that's it. And you can see, as a matter of fact, with judges, the Judicial Qualification Commissions and the way that judges are treated as well, the number of complaints made against federal judges compared to the number of judges that are actually impeached speaks for itself.
It's like 99.9% of all grievances
Judges-
are summarily dismissed
Yeah, judges don't
by
get-
most grievance committees around the country, correct?
Yes, and the fact is that judges have immunity. Why they have the immunity, I can understand. They need to have immunity so that they're not going to be judged on their rulings except by a higher court. But they can be punished for going outside of the jurisdiction. And one of the things that...
Well, it's an ethics issue at the judiciary committees.
Pardon me?
It's an ethics issue at the judiciary committees, whereas if you try to sue a judge for maybe administrative acts, which you can, it's a matter of law. So you have two different
But nobody's going
mechanisms
to
working.
take... I mean, the problem is you'd have to... I mean, the problem... I think the real problem is that the court system has complexity built into it to protect themselves from anybody else being able to deal with it. It's what I call the ceiling of complexity. And I think that the average citizen runs up against that ceiling of complexity just if you say to them, you have to go to court. And so the fact that it's a complex problem prevents people from going into the court pro se. I mean, the way it used to be before the bar associations became in control of lawyers, the lawyers were basically citizens who were representing other people. You could go to court on your own and defend yourself. I mean, Judge Judy, her court is not made up of lawyers coming in representing people. People are in there in front of cameras representing themselves to the judge. Well, why isn't that true at all levels? And the reason it's not true at all levels is because the legal profession is benefiting from it. The legal profession went through several changes over the course of time where lawyers started to bill for their hours. The joke of the matter is in 1949...
Well, that's a small claims court. That's a little...
Yeah, but in 1949, when the Supreme Court said that that the integration of lawyers could be done, one of the statements that was made at the time by the Supreme Court was that if lawyers, and it's a quote from one of the Supreme Court justices, if lawyers are in this for the money, they need to get another profession. And of course, that is about as far-fetched as you could possibly get. Lawyers today are in it for the money, and lawyers have the ability to manipulate. And I mean, I was talking to somebody the other day who their grandson was arrested because he was in a car with somebody who had been in prison, and there was a gun in the car. And so the grandson got arrested, and the grandson was basically, he had no money, he had no means, and so they appointed a public defender to protect him. And the public defender, when he found out that his grandparents had money and that his mother had some money put away, he said, well, you need to get a private lawyer. And he recommended a private lawyer. And the private lawyer started representing this boy because he was able to get paid by the mother and by the grandparents, and took over $25,000 from them and never did a thing. Never protected him. The boy's in prison today. And this is the kind of thing that goes on, and their recourse against that attorney is such an uphill battle, because if they go to the Florida bar to complain against him, the chances are that the Florida bar is going to get a letter from that attorney where the attorney is able to explain everything that he did for this boy. Nobody can prove that he didn't do it, and also if it's a fee dispute, they don't even handle it. So I mean, it's a system that is broken and so flawed that our rights have been diminished. We are actually and can be subjected to star chamber kinds of hearings, where you go into the court and you can be accused of something, and it's hard to have proper representation. And this is a problem that's rampant in this country. And I think that the other aspect
and
of
also
it
we don't know what's happening behind closed doors and telephone calls with lawyers.
Well, lawyers are going to be in the community.
Supposed to defend you.
The lawyers know each other.
Don't rock the boat.
It's like the divorce lawyers, I mean, they work together all the time, and in many cases, the divorce lawyers they know what the financial picture is for the parties, and they're going to be in that arena long after the people who are getting divorced are there. The professionals are going to be left there to deal with each other. They're not going to want to annoy the other or get them angry or create a schism between them, so they work together. And what you have is both sides working against the client.
Exactly.
And that becomes an impossible venture for people to deal with, and very expensive. There's been a huge shift in wealth from ordinary folks to the legal profession. The legal profession, if you look at the statistics today, from the standpoint of who gets paid what, it used to be doctors were among the higher paid professions, and now it's lawyers. And these, relates to, I think this country has three, very difficult situations. One is we have a lot of regulatory issues. We're overregulated. I think we're over-litigated, and we're overtaxed. And all three of those areas are support to attorneys. The tax rules, the tax laws, the convoluted tax code that we have requires an attorney to interpret it. Litigation, of course, is brought by attorneys. The regulatory system requires lawyers to take you through the regulatory system. And in corporate America, I think one of the things that the Wall Street protesters are protesting is the fact that corporations are not getting punished for things that they've done to people. And in most instances, probably 99% of the time, the reason why a corporation would do something where they would go down a particular path is because they were advised to by their counsel, by their general counsel. Their general counsel is never brought into the picture. The corporate officers get stuck with the blame, but the general counsel who may have advised them never gets any of the problem. And then the people who are, people where when they catch an attorney with his hand in your pocket, they'll do something, like Scott Rothstein. They don't talk about the fact that Scott Rothstein was reported to the bar on several occasions before they did anything about it. They don't talk about the fact that Scott Rothstein was a member of the Judicial Nominating Committee. They don't talk about the fact that Scott Rothstein had elevated himself to a position of being on the
Florida Bar Grievance Committee.
on the Florida Bar Grievance Committee. These are all things that protected him, and when the person that really kind of blew the whistle on him asked him about what he was doing, he wanted him to show him the contracts of how he was making these deals with these settlements. He said, I'm an attorney in good standing with the Florida Bar. And that's the end of that story.
Well, it shouldn't be that way. I mean, that's evidence, exonerating evidence, and it's ignored. Now, Bob, I want to get back to that petition that you had, that you really represent. You and your people, the citizens really the citizens behind you represented the true character of the state. You had a victory. You won the fight. But then, after you left the fight, the lawyers weaseled away back to re-implementing the gag rules. Is that correct?
The basic thing is that the gag rules and confidential rules are basically among the same as there's a certain amount of retaliation if you do something.
Yeah, but they somehow got those gag rules back, didn't they?
Yes, they put two new laws in there and convoluted the whole thing, and it's
Were they the legislature?
No, the lawyers did it themselves in the Florida Bar, and of course they just get it rubber stamped by the lawyers and the legislature. And
I don't understand how they could do that after you won your case.
Yeah, well,
you won the case. It's now precedent. What happened?
Well,
and if you don't mind me putting you a little bit on the spot, why didn't you pursue it further? And
believe it or not, the system is solely corrupt. The fact that I'd stood up and fought as hard as I did, and there were certain people out there to get me. And believe it or not, I was the president of the Motel and Apartments Association for the city of Hialeah and Miami Springs area. I've been to Tallahassee on 3 different occasions on behalf of the citizens in the city of Hialeah. I fought the drug dealers. I put out 40,000 Say No to Drug stickers and all over Hialeah, Miami Lakes, Opelika, the whole area. And I couldn't believe what I was getting involved in. I went before on television cameras and telling them that the drug dealers were coming in the area. In Hialeah, the case, the Mary Leaders had come over from the burial boat lift and come into Hialeah and were breaking into our buildings. Many of them were out of crazy houses and perverts and that sort of thing. I fought them so hard to do this. I went on, I don't know how many times, television cameras, the newspapers had different articles about me fighting so hard against the drug dealers. And all of a sudden, November 2nd, I got a very good, clean record. I got a couple of minor speeding tickets and parking tickets, and that's the whole record of my life. I went to work November 2nd, 1990, had a perfectly clean record, and all of a sudden our corrupt mayor in the city of Hialeah and our crooked and corrupt police chief, and they had a SWAT team coming out of, I got out of my pickup truck, I had my 2-year-old daughter in my arms, and here they grabbed the 2-year-old girl and said, just throw her in HRS. They threw me to the ground and put the handcuffs on me and said, we've just recalled all your properties. Okay?
That's really playing dirty, and they do that. They really do that to the activists, don't they?
This is what it is. And if you speak out in the system, they're going to get you one way or the other. And like I say, they stole everything I worked for all my life, threw me in jail. I asked for water in the jail, and they told me to drink out of the toilet. I knew that I was in trouble. Finally, my 86-year-old mother had to come at midnight and bail me out of jail. Believe it or not, I made a phone call to Tallahassee to my former attorney. He used to be the Chief Justice. He said, Bob, I heard about it. My sister-in-law called me and told me up here in Tallahassee what they did to you. Come up to Tallahassee right away. So I got in my car and I drove all the way to Tallahassee. He made a couple phone calls in Tallahassee. 3 months later, the Florida Supreme Court ruled that the whole thing they had done to me was illegal, it was unconstitutional, and they had to give my properties back.
Okay, can I ask you a question? Why didn't you turn around and sue them? Why did you have them?
They will retaliate. It's like the Nazis are in power. It's like the Nazis are in power, And if you do something to them, they're going to do something 10 times worse back to you. That is the system. It's not going to change until we get lawyers out of public office. We have separation of powers and checks and balances. We have neither today. And it's going to get worse because, like I say, it doesn't matter what you do. You're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. And like I say, when something is cruel as throwing me in jail, and like I say, I think I got about 2 or 3 minor speeding tickets in my whole life. I got a couple of, maybe I got about half a dozen parking tickets. That's my whole breaking the law. And meantime, I'm president of the Motown Apartment Association. I've been to Tallahassee before the governor and the cabinet, explaining things that were happening in our city that we have to change. And again, it was all done above board with petitions and the rest of it. And all of a sudden you get thrown in jail, and all your properties that you worked for all your life are gone from you. It's corrupt.
Yeah, but it seems to me you had them. I guess you're fearful of the retaliation that you just explained.
It's not what you know, it's who you know.
But if you had pursued it and sued them, first of all, you might have a little bit of money in your pocket from that to further your cause.
The thing is, it's not worth it because all they have a bunch of lawyers in City Hall. They will check your buildings out. They'll check the foundation, the footing, the electrical. They'll check this. They will make it so hard in you that you're just wasting your time.
Yeah.
They know they're protected. In other words, there's 2 kinds of lawyers in every courthouse in America. One that knows the law, the other one knows the judge. And that's the bare fact.
Okay.
The fact that my attorney used to be the Chief Justice and informed me that it's all corrupt.
Well, thank God there was one honest justice, ex-justice, on your behalf, and you were one of the lucky ones.
Oh, definitely. I thank God every day.
Okay, now I'm going to turn the conversation to grand juries.
Yes.
Okay, but the grand jury is a way to defeat it. You can, or juries in general, that you can bypass the corrupt rulings of a judge and have the citizens decide. And the citizens can not only decide on the facts, but they can also decide on the law, whether the law is correct or not. Enormous power.
Well, that would be true if you can get to a jury.
Well, you have an absolute right to a jury.
No, you don't. You don't have an absolute. You have an absolute right to the jury, but you have to be able to get through the. You have to get through the procedural portion. You have to get to the point where it can happen. And I have been involved in a case personally where we never got a jury trial, or we were entitled to a jury trial, but by the manipulation between the judge and the other lawyers, it was prevented from going
Okay, I need to know the
jury.
specifics on that, because that's how you got to protect your rights, by knowing the specifics and knowing what else you could have done. But go ahead.
Well, in the specific case I'm talking about is in the bankruptcy of Barron's. I was the director of Barron's stores, and I became intimately involved in what happened in the bankruptcy of Barron's. Basically, through the bankruptcy lawyers, the manipulation of the bankruptcy court, use of fraudulent documents, that bankruptcy was never, of course you're dealing with federal court, which is the federal bankruptcy court, and then you're bringing actions against attorneys for malpractice in the civil court, and you're whipsawed between the two. In order to be able to work through that system, the costs are phenomenal. And so you try to do it on a pro se basis, which is the way that was happening. The plaintiffs were pro se, and they were suing attorneys for malpractice, and the court basically stifled the entire case. And the judge that did that...
How?
Well, by making rulings that, the plaintiff it was necessary for the plaintiff to get, for example, an expert witness, an attorney to act as an expert witness. That was one of the requirements that the judge said that was necessary.
Well, that's
for the
a
plaintiff.
lie.
I understand that. There were many lies that there were many rulings that were done inappropriately, that were not correct, that were not in accordance with the law. There were documents that were submitted that were fraudulent documents, that were proven to be fraudulent documents. The judge involved ignored all of that. And, of course, the judge's statement is, if you don't like it, take it to the higher level.
Why didn't you? Or
Well, they
you?
did take it to the higher level. On the higher level, there was also corruption at the
So now you're
at that
in the
level.
appellate court.
You're at the appellate court, and the only recourse after that is to go to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court's going to hear it. These are all, this is not something...
Okay, so you took it to the Supreme Court. I want to get to this point. It's very
Sure.
important. You took it to the Supreme Court, and let me guess, denied, no explanation.
I don't know if it was, I haven't had contact with the case for a while because it became impossible for me to remain involved. It's one of the reasons why I started the radio show, Disbar the Florida Bar, because really everything that happened was as a result of the bar not taking action against attorneys who were absolutely, totally corrupt in what they had done. They had lied to the court, they had lied to the Bar Association, but nothing was ever done about that. So I created the radio show to air all of these things, and it was you just could never get traction with anybody. And let me just say something,
Yeah.
1 second.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the problem is that the number of victims who can demonstrate the demonstrable damages that are done by the rogue attorneys, the number of victims that are involved, is very small. And I say that because the percentage of people who are really affected by these rogue attorneys, it's not an overwhelming majority. It's a very small number of people. And unless it happens to you, unless it's your ox being gored, you're not going to understand what's going on.
Right.
But when it is your ox being gored, you understand fully what's going on,
Right.
and you get the frustration of how to deal with it. So that issue, because it is not affecting everybody, they're not going to raise up and say, this system is flawed, because people have had good experience with attorneys. People have gone to court and they've gotten what they were supposed to get in court, and things were handled properly. But the people that didn't, where there was this damage done by rogue attorneys, they're few in number. And so the battle for those people to get heard, those people to operate pro se, for those people to go into the court situation and try and fight for their rights is very difficult. So that's why, in my opinion, there needs to be a regulatory system that protects the public against rogue attorneys. One of the statements
So where are you going to go? The legislature to get that done?
Well, they tried. The problem is, for example, I interviewed a former congressman by the name of Melvin, who was up in the northern part of the state of Florida, who introduced legislation on several occasions to make the bar, to make lawyers part of the regulatory system as every other professional in the state of Florida under the Department of Business and Professional Regulation. Problem is that in order for it to get anywhere, he had to go through the Judicial Committee in the House or the State Senate, and those are basically lawyers are sitting on those judicial committees. Those lawyers are members of the Florida Bar.
And Bob, that's your contention, right?
Exactly, 100%. Lawyers should not be in the legislative or executive branch of government because they're in violation of separation of powers, and that's the cornerstone of republic separation. In other words, Article 2, Section 3 of the Florida Supreme Court ruling is that you cannot be a member of two parts of government at the same time. And
Florida Constitution.
Florida Constitution, I'm sorry, Florida Constitution says you cannot be a member of two parts of government at the same time. If you're a member of the legislative or executive branch of government, you cannot be a member of the judicial branch.
Right, because who do you owe your oath to if you're a lawyer on a judiciary committee at legislature? Who do you owe your oath to?
Well, that's I think that's the crux of the problem, is that you owe your allegiance to the state, and you swear an oath of allegiance to the Constitution of the state of Florida. But in the background is the fact that when you leave the legislature, you're going to go back to a law practice, and that's where your income is going to come from, and that law practice can be controlled, destroyed by the Florida Bar, because the Florida Bar has that kind of power. And because of the Bar Association's power, they can manipulate everything. And it's an interesting philosophy. I mean, our laws, the rule of law is also based on precedent, and precedent is established almost on a daily basis by the courts. because every ruling that a judge makes can be held as precedent. Of course, when it gets to the higher level, it has more weight. When it gets to the appellate level, when the appeals court overturns a lower ruling or appeals court agrees with a lower ruling and says, yes, this is what the precedent is. But in order to get to that point, to correct a lower court's improper ruling, it is very difficult. The time, the money, the need for representation, the ability to outlast the professionals is impossible.
Yeah, but there's a lot of citizens who have the longevity. I mean, I'm not going to waste time right now talking about individuals that I know that are doing that. We have to wait just a second.
Yeah, the problem is that there are people who may be able to afford to go through the process, who have the time, who have the money, who have the proper representation to go through the appellate process, and they may get to where the appellate court says that they're right, and maybe it'll end there. But if the other side says we want to go further and go to the Supreme Court or whatever, the point is that you need to have money, time, and representation in order to be able to do that. And when you get there, you don't necessarily get a ruling that's meaningful. You can get a ruling where they'll just give you a one-word denied, or they'll say affirm per curiam, where they don't even show you what they heard. When my experience with the appellate court down here with one of the Third District Court of Appeals was that there were things going on at the Third District Court of Appeals which were incredible in my mind, where there's supposed to be a panel of judges that are ruling on issues, and one judge, the chief judge, is initialing it, and there's no other initials involved, and information is redacted. If I ask for information from the court, they're redacting information from the file so that you don't see the full file. I mean, incredible things that you'd say, this is hard to believe that this goes on, but it does.
Yeah, so what we need is the legislatures in the various states, because it happens statewide, to stipulate that when all decisions must be followed with a finding in the appellate court and the Supreme Court as well. Don't you think that would help? And
it would help, but
then you said before that the problem would be that it would boggle down the courts.
Well, you already have problems with the court. The courts are already overworked.
But my argument is you would have less litigation if you only have honesty up front. You only have to then the litigation would be cut in half.
Well, if the laws...
Because we're always running around trying to get justice after the fact of these
If the judges didn't have as much power as they have, and if the judges didn't have the immunity that they have, and if there was a way to control what they do and what their rulings are, I mean, not everybody gets a jury trial. That's part of the problem. It's not really, you're not being judged by your peers. You're being judged by a judge. And that judge has the power to say whatever that judge wants to say in that courtrum and to rule whatever way that judge wants to rule.
Right.
And there's nothing that you can do about that.
We have an absolute right to a jury. It is absolutely guaranteed in most state constitutions and the federal constitution.
Only in certain instances. If it's criminal, yes.
Yeah.
But if it's not criminal, you're not guaranteed a jury trial. We didn't get a jury trial. You're not guaranteed a jury trial in any circumstance except the criminal courts.
Okay, maybe the strategy is always make it a criminal case.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, Bob, 3 minutes before I change tapes.
Okay.
What do you want to add on?
Well, I just think that, like I say, if we're supposed to be following the law, then the law better be followed itself. The law says separation of powers and checks and balances. We have neither today. Today you've got lawyer legislators making the laws, then you've got lawyer judges adjudicating the laws, and then you've got lawyer powers enforcing laws. Did not Lord Acton say power corrupts, and power corrupts absolutely? It's a corrupt form of government. And unless we get the Federalist Papers as mandatory reading for all the students all across the country, then there's not a lot of hope out there.
Bob, what are the Federalist Papers?
Federalist Papers were written by James Madison, Alexander Helms, and John Day, saying this is to be a government of the people, by the people, for the people. Today it's a government of the lawyers, by the lawyers, and for the lawyers. It has nothing whatsoever to do with the people. And the system of justice in this country is you're innocent until proven broke. And believe me, I've got a lot of people who are friends of mine that are broke today because they've come to me and asked for help, and there's nothing you can do. In other words, I think when Newt Gingrich, as part of the contract with America, stated very plainly he wanted all of the incoming congressmen to read the Federalist Papers so they'll understand separation of powers, checks and balances, and find out what the Founding Fathers envisioned for the future of the country. That was his contract with America. And it was a wonderful speech, and believe it or not, it took a woman to stand up and do something. Her name is Mary Webster, the Webster Dictionary family. And she said, well, that's funny. She said, most of the incoming congressmen won't be able to understand the Federalist Papers because they're written in the old colonial-style English language. So she spent the next 4 years of her life translating the Federalist Papers into modern language. So now at least we have a document that people can understand. Now, if we could get as a mandatory reading all of our congressmen to read the Federalist Papers, to understand separation of powers, to understand checks and balances, we would have a major victory. And the fact that Newt Gingrich is running for the presidency, maybe he'll stick to his word and pass that as a law. Because most of you judges and lawyers have never read the Federalist Papers.
Furthermore, it's not even taught in the law schools. Is that correct? Do you want to say something about that?
Exactly. Most of your law professors have just glanced over them because they said they're too difficult to read. So now that they're in modern language, they still don't want to read them because they don't want to admit that the thing is all screwed up. You got the same people making laws, interpret laws, enforce the laws, and that's the very...
You got a quote from the Federalist Papers that basically encompasses all this? A quote from, what was it? Who was it?
Madison stated very plainly. He said James Madison was not a lawyer, he was a political scientist. And he stated very plainly, he said, if the effective control of all three branches of government get under the single same hands control, then we will have tyranny and corruption, and there'll be nothing in the system to correct the problem. In other words, you couldn't go to the Nazi Party and tell them they're killing Jews. That was their purpose. You wouldn't go to the slave owners and saying you're abusing the slaves. That was their purpose. You wouldn't go to the Ku Klux Klan, you're saying you abuse the blacks. That was their purpose. Now, would you go to our corrupt court system and say we need to abuse? That's the purpose of the whole court system, is to get ripped off.
Okay.